The opinions expressed on the radio program by the hosts, co-hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions and responsibility of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Genesis Radio, www.genesisradio.com, Genesis Radio's owners, management, or affiliates.
Good evening and welcome to GenesisRadio.com. My name is Kendall Stevenson. I am the host of the Empowerment Show. There you go. And I am the host of the Empowerment Show. The Empowerment Show is part of unity in the community. If you'd like to give us a call, I got these two gentlemen here that are very, very knowledgeable. Give us a call at 888-304-4401. As I said, this today I feel very fortunate and I feel honored because I'm sitting between these two brothers here, and since I met them, they changed the way that I think about certain things. They've given me some insight to who I am and where I stand on this planet. So most of you guys should already know Mr. Ronald Yates. He has a show called Reasons for Reasons. This young man to my right, his name is
Brother Kyle.
Brother Kyle. He likes to be called Brother Kyle. No last name, Mr. Winfield?
You could say that. If you like to use Mr. Winfield, that's fine.
These
are all attributes.
All
That's
attributes. Right. All right. Well, as I said, these two brothers are very knowledgeable. One very knowledgeable when it comes to history, and one very knowledgeable of what's going on now in our present. So with the two, we always say that in order to know what's going on in our future, then we got to know what's going on in our past and our present. So this is why I thought it was a really good idea to bring these two guys together. So now, always I start the show off with a moment of gratitude. Now, I've been very grateful for the family and the support that I've had. I've had some issues going on, and I'm just so glad that I have the support of my family, my friends, and technology, honestly, that it's evolved to where it's at. So without further ado, we'll start with the historian. How are you, sir?
I'm well. Good to see you, Ken.
I'm doing well, doing great, doing outstanding.
Yes.
So tell us about who you are.
Okay, so I've been involved in education for the greater part of 32 years. I did that apparel. As you know, I made clothes, so I've been in the apparel industry. But I've always been involved with historical contexts, things that have to do with ancient people of color, regardless of what section of the planet. And I've always found an interest in piecing together, certain periods of time and certain cultures. I found that to be, another passion of mine. So that, along with, the garment district, are two of the things that I really enjoy.
That's what you enjoy?
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be outstanding. It sounds like you've been for a better lack of the term, an educated thug.
How about it?
Because in order for you to be the entrepreneur, you got to kind of be a little thuggish.
Yeah.
In order to make it in that field, and in order to do what you do as a historian, then you got to kind of be like a scholar. So
and aggressive.
And aggressive at times, depends on what you're teaching and who you're teaching it to.
That's right.
So with that being said, like I said, we brought ourselves back to the past, which is what you're going to do. Right now, here we go. Let me just swing around to my man, Mr. Ronald Yates. Reasons for reasons. So lately in the news, oh my God, the way that they're treating this woman, Kamala Harris.
Right.
To me personally, I find it offensive. And I find it offensive in a lot of different ways, because when they start talking about things like this guy talking about somebody eating cats and dogs.
Right.
First, they put it on the Haitians. And those people, when they see me walk down the street, they don't know if I'm Haitian, Jamaican, or whatever.
Correct.
And like now in that little town, because of the stuff that this man has spewed out, they're on like a little war zone down there.
Yes.
People are walking around the streets with AKs and whatnot.
Well, that's what you have when we come to learn or to expect from Donald Trump.
Right.
That is his MO, to divide and conquer. And, one of the things that they were saying about Trump's campaign, he said himself that people do not like me, and for a number of reasons. So his focus now is to get people not to like Kamala Harris, to dislike her more than they dislike him. I don't see how he has a very clear campaign strategy, right? His running mate, who said that Donald Trump was a racist, now is the one who's spewing racist epitaphs and saying, this ridiculous story about Haitians eating cats and dogs.
He's falling in line.
Right. Now, how does that happen? Right. You say this man is a racist, yet now you want to be his running mate. And you say he's a racist, but now you're the one who is dividing this community in Springfield.
Right.
And what I'd like to know, and my belief is that these people were brought here from Haiti, right, and have, status in this country as residents, or they are in the process of, getting residential status. So if that's the case, why are we targeting them? And in reality, is he, J.D. Vance and Donald Trump, targeting Haitians? Is he targeting Black and brown people, in particular?
Well, I'm going to tell you something. We can talk about that Willie Lynch business, because that kind of sounds like how we got here. It kind of reminds me of how we had people or a group of people who decided that they wanted to make a better slave. So one of the ways was to segregate us amongst ourselves, which is kind of like what he's talking about is happening, where we being segregated to go against ourselves. And because of that mythology and whatnot that has been forced upon us, and we have been brainwashed into it, we start to actually live that kind of lifestyle.
It's unfortunate. When this great idea that we know of as America, going into the stage that we're in now, there really wasn't any bigotry. Okay, so we're going back to the 1600s, early 1600s, say 1620s. And there's a reference you can use. This is a book written by a professor by the name of Karen Eisenberg. The book is called White Trash. And she goes into detail about how the natives and the newly arrived settlers were cohabitating and living together and working together. They were learning the crops and learning the wooded area and the mountain area. So I share that story because the only way that you can make following the orders of a despot or following the orders of a particular group of people is you have to separate the smaller, or I should say the larger group of people, right? Get them to not be on one accord, get them to go against each other, create things to find differences amongst each other, like pigment, right? As opposed to your desire to survive, for some in a new place, for others in their homeland. So I just think that from a strategic point of view, I think it's quite intelligent to continue to get people to separate in order to attain, I guess, a certain amount of votes.
Well, according to Willie Lynch, it would last 1,000 years.
How about
It
that?
hasn't been 1,000 years, right? And then we got people like this Donald Trump, and you got people that are following him, and not only they're following him, they're willing to go out and kill people or hurt other people because of what he says. It's kind of like, to me, I'm starting to think of a guy, Jimmy Jones, and the way that the people go to this man and levitate. It's almost like they're on a drug or they evolve in a cult, or what is it?
Well, I did a little research on Jim Jones. You're talking about the guy who took the people down into Guyana.
Yeah.
And
Cyanide King.
Well, what they're saying now is that Jim Jones was a CIA agent.
Look at that.
And that he was down in Guyana, right? It wasn't necessarily Jim Jones that forced them to drink the Kool-Aid. Some of the, now that they've done forensics on what happened, some of the shots weren't coming from Jim Jones' people. And there was a senator who was going to investigate what happened, and she was killed also to make sure that there were no witnesses. So, of course, when you control the media, you control people's way of thinking and their perception. And, going back to what Brother Kyle said, it wasn't until 1681 in this country that there was the first white person. There were no white people. They were English, they were French. They came to this country and there was a rebellion in Virginia, Bacon's rebellion. And Bacon, his militia was made up of Black, Caucasian, and Native American. So the British came up with the idea, said, we got to divide these folks. So what we're going to do is we're going to come up with a new concept called whiteness. And during that time, white people were indentured servants on the same plantation as Black people. So the British said, okay, I'll tell you what. If you want to stay with your Black wife, you will now be reduced back to servitude. So you break the marriage. Then you give the Caucasians, the newly minted white people, you give them certain advantages that you don't get to the Black and the brown. So now that causes the separation and the animosity.
So that's kind of what's happening now, because I listen to when I listen to some of the brothers on the street, it's like they have this thing about they're not going to vote for Kamala Harris because of X, Y, and Z, and a lot of it is based off propaganda. Because unlike this young man, they don't do any research, so they have no clue even to where they come from. I mean, it's gotten to the point now where a lot of young men don't care. If they really have the attitude, you can teach them and lead a horse to water the whole night. They just don't care. This divide and conquer thing. I'm sorry, but this divide and conquer thing, it happened a while ago.
Right.
It's not only in this country that it happened. It happened to us before we even kind of started coming in this country, if you want to say. When the what do you call it? What do you call those people? They speak Spanish. Starts with a P.
The Portuguese.
So when the Portuguese started hitting it, they came with the we were talking. You had Christianity coming to Africa kind of on one side, and you kind of had Islam coming another, and whatever was in the middle was us. So we kind of got broken up. We went that way, we went this way, right? We weren't really sure about which direction we should go.
One way to look at it.
But what it did is it's made those Africans more docile and easier to control.
Yeah, that I would say that does fall into a category of certain groups in that part of the country, or I should say that part of the world. But I just want to piggyback off of something that was said earlier. This divide and conquer. It's a very effective strategy, right? If you think about it, it's done in all aspects of society, right? We even, when I say we, I mean people of color, melanated people. We even find ourselves, getting caught up into it. She's Jamaican, he's Trinidadian, he's Guyanese, so on and so forth. But you really won't know unless you ask, right? The same applies to our Caucasian brothers and sisters, right? You don't know if someone's from Belarus or if someone is from Turkey, right? Whereas this person from Turkey is far removed by way of DNA from someone from Belarus, right? But you'd have to ask. So it's very effective, and it gets us to the point where we don't ask, right? When if you did, we find out more about each other's culture than we would if we just assumed that this person is just Black.
Or just to say this,
or white.
they don't care what culture you come from.
Some don't.
I would say the powers that be. And you can see the powers that be. All you got to do is look at all the Republicans or look at all the politicians they got. And you can kind of see who's in charge of what and who's doing what. And ain't too many look like us up there. A lot of the ones of us that are up there, except for my girl, what's her name, Jessica Crockett.
Jasmine Crockett.
Jasmine
Yeah,
Crockett.
yeah,
She is
yeah.
no joke. No joke. Except for our brothers and sisters that are like her with that attitude, they assimilated.
But the thing is, they're not the power structure. There is a power structure behind them that dictates to them
Please don't
exactly
tell me
what to
you're
do.
going to tell me the Illuminati.
Well, you can call them many names. You can
Mhm.
call them the Round Table, the Council of 300. You can call them the Illuminati. You can call them the Conquering Mariah Wind.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a cabal of very rich people. See, the Federal Reserve Bank is a privately owned bank.
Yes, it is.
Owned by families in Europe. So now if you are the ones who are controlling the flow of money in and out of global economies, who's really in control? I was talking to somebody earlier today. If you look on the back of a US dollar, there are a number of symbols there that they call Masonic symbols.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they are. But if you look on the left side of the dollar, there's an eagle. The eagle on the dollar faces left. That is a Kemetic symbol. That is actually the falcon. It has been reimagined as an eagle, but above that there's a circle. Inside that circle is a symbol. That'll tell you the real power structure and who controls the flow of money. Inside that circle is the Star of David. So now you understand why we are now supporting a genocide in Israel.
You ever noticed that?
I did.
You noticed that?
It's the phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
The bird is the phoenix,
Mm-hmm.
and it is from Kemet, as you said. And these symbols have been in the currency ever since the settlers created a currency. Because keep in mind, when the settlers got here, there was already an existing currency. You can find
corn.
Say again.
Corn.
Well, it was in the form of silver, gold, and brass.
Okay.
So like you can find this in there's a book. It's a very old book. It's called The Story of Us.
Mm-hmm.
And you can find it in the Library of Congress. And it really breaks down what this country was like prior to settlers arriving and what the people looked like that were here.
Do you know the name of the author?
The Story of Us, I forget the name of this author.
Do you know the name of the author?
I do not.
It is something that you can pull up.
Okay.
On Google.
Now let's just get the name of the book, because
The Story of Us.
I know we're sitting here, we're chopping it up, right?
Yeah.
But you got a whole lot of people.
No, The Story of Us, U.S.
The Story of Us.
Correct.
Okay.
And it's a very old book, and you have to wear gloves to handle it when you go to the Library of Congress. So the reason I bring that up is because it ties into everything that we're saying right now. All right. When this country, or this rock, this continent that we call America, right, that runs all the way up from Canada all the way down, it has always been a place for people to seek refuge, right? There's always been a place for people to find a new home, right? And it reflects in all of the faces, the busts that surround the Library of Congress, right? Because you'll see every race of people on those busts that surround it. Now, when it started to get twisted was around the 1600s. Okay, because what was being discovered was that there were more people of color, period, all around than anything, as it is today, right? In order to get a stronghold, there had to be a form of psychological operation in order to convince groups of people, swaths of people, that these are the people that are in control, right? Not these people, right? And I'm gonna end off with this, just as we mentioned earlier when we were discussing. Right. The settlers didn't get permission to come here, right, until they signed a treaty, and that treaty was called the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, right? This is around 1780, 1787. Mm-hmm. That's when the Moors gave them permission to come here, knowing that there were already people here. You understand? So it became a new world to someone that it was new to. Right. Okay? So that's why we have to be careful of the terms that we're using that are reflecting someone else telling a story, and that story may be of you. Right.
Well, it seems like a lot of people want to tell this story about Miss Harris, Madam Harris. They keep constantly. I'm telling you, man, I've heard some that she locks up black men. You know, and I was, whether she did or she didn't, she was a prosecutor.
Right.
I'm just wondering. And if she was locking up black men, then the police must have brought them to the courthouse where she works at, because she didn't go out to the house and say you are under arrest.
That's correct.
That's right. She was just a prosecutor. And I'm just tired of hearing, like I said, and especially it's coming from the male population, the black males. You know, they're like, this one guy tells me, well, I'm going to vote for Trump because the tax break, the 2025 tax break that they're going to get, right? So I tell him, I says, really, but what about your employees? What about everybody else? And he didn't really care. All he cared about himself.
Well, you know, people, like you said, don't do research, right? If you just go back to Ronald Reagan said, let's make America great again. Not Donald Trump. It was Reagan. And when you talk about tax breaks, okay, you cut taxes predominantly for the top earners, not really the middle class and poor people. Well, eventually, what's going to happen? You're going to run into a deficit.
Of course.
Who's got to pay back that money?
You, me,
exactly.
him.
So it's not a tax break; it's a tax increase.
Of course it is.
But because
they call it a tariff.
Exactly. And here's the thing, right? Because these people have so much faith in Donald Trump, basically, if he goes and tells them, "Well, I'm going to impose tariffs on China," right, and tells them it's not going to be a tax increase. Well, Fox News is going to echo that. And then the next day at work, you're going to hear people, oh, it's a tariff, but it's not going to affect us. Well, if you're a businessman and it costs you $200 to produce a refrigerator, and Trump is now charging you 100% tariff, that's $400. You're not going to pass that along to the consumer?
Of course you are.
Right. So everything, we're talking about inflation now, we go back to inflation. We go back to costs going up. But these people have so much faith in this man, right, that they believe he is going to restore America. Or restore to what?
I just keep, that's my biggest question is restore to what?
Right.
Well, so what was America what time period are we talking about? 1950?
That's what
was a good time period for us, or
well,
what is it?
There was never really a good time period for
hell
us.
no.
But for America, post-World War II, America's economy was booming. You had the interstate highways going in. You had veterans coming home from war, building homes, taking the GI Bill, going to college, right? You had the economy flowing, right? All these people buying homes. You buy homes, you need refrigerators, you need cars, you need durable goods. So the economy was doing well, right? After the war in Korea, there was a brief period of peace, right? Where people would go and enjoy life.
Good 10 years, I said.
Right. Not quite 10 years, because we were doing, covert ops overseas, right? In Cuba, places like that. So we had that period, that brief respite between wars. So people in this country were doing well, right? We're old enough to remember stories like Father Knows Best, right? One man went to work and he made enough money, home, car, send the kids to college. It was a good time for them. So they want to revert back to that. But how do you do it with a country that's $36 trillion in debt?
You got to take it from somewhere.
It's not possible.
It's not possible.
Yeah, you can.
No.
What you do is you do things like, I don't know, privatize Social Security, get rid of Medicare, all those little things, those little social programs that are costing you money.
Right.
That's where you start pulling the resources from them.
But they don't. Right. But see, Medicare. So Social Security doesn't cost them anything because that's our money. It doesn't cost them a dime.
But they're still taking the money.
Because they say it's an entitlement.
Right.
And they made us believe, some of us believe that isn't an entitlement. We don't realize how you're entitled to your own money.
Yeah.
It's a government entitlement because they're going to tell you, no, you can't have it. But it's your money, so it doesn't cost them anything. What costs this country is war. That's what's costing us. What cost this country is the fact that we've sold our manufacturing base overseas. And then we turn around and blame China. China didn't close Bethlehem Steel. American businessmen did.
Well, not that I'm making any excuses for America in that sense or any way, but a lot of the consumers didn't want to pay the high cost that it was costing to buy the goods and services. And when they started shipping the manufacturing overseas, we were told that we would be getting a cheaper deal as far as buying it. You know, like when Trump says he loves the poorly educated,
right?
You see, I don't know if you remember this commercial used to come on. He used to say, "An educated consumer is my best customer." Remember that?
Sims.
Right.
Yeah.
So they didn't want you to be an educated consumer. They want you to be dumb. They don't want you to see the whole picture. So when they started shipping this stuff overseas, you didn't see the whole picture. What you saw is when you went to the store that what used to cost more money, like these glasses, are now cheaper.
Right.
And it was cheaper for the manufacturer at our time to make them in Taiwan or to make them in Japan. Remember, you used to be made in Japan?
Sure.
Yeah. It was cheaper to send it there to make it because the consumer didn't want to pay the high prices.
Well, here's the thing. When you do that, you destroy the middle class. So think about it. Our generation, where'd your cars come from? Detroit. Rolled off the assembly line in Motown. It ain't Motown no more. People in Detroit and Flint, Michigan are drinking poison water. These cities now are look like third world countries. Whatever that is, that's some creation, but that's what it looks like. How did that happen in America? And the products we're buying from China, how durable are they?
Not very. They're not good at all. Not that the goods that are made, to me, the goods and services that we receive from China are inadequate. That's just my opinion. They're in that you buy it. Even now from Korea, you buy the Samsung, it's a piece of garbage, man. Or really, you have it for 6 months, and now it's done. And the service, because when you try to call to get some decent services, that's not happening. So I'm sorry, I want to get back to the man. I can't leave you out of that. I started learning about this cat named Massa Musa. Can you tell me a little about? I know he was. I know the one thing. He was the richest man in the world.
Yes.
And he was black.
Absolutely.
And he was black, and he looked like me.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
That's a fact. So
Right on.
Mansa Musa, as you mentioned, was the richest black man in the world. This was in the 12th, 13th century. We're talking. He actually traveled here looking for his distant relatives who were here in North America, what was known back then as Turtle Island. Right. So just to try to tie that into everything that you're talking about right now. So this was a time when we were dealing with kings and monarchs, and there was a different type of allegiance to the way in which things were being governed. And just getting back to what you were saying about how certain people believe in the candidates and what the candidates are saying. That's always been the case. I'm going to talk to you because I know what you want to hear. That was the case with Caesar. That was the case.
I was going to say that. I think they got that from Rome.
Yeah, this is not
government structure like that from Rome.
Well, just the way in which you're addressing and engaging people, right? It's. I'm telling you what you want to hear, right? And that's not something that you need to do in certain other cultures, where it's about us, almost like a union. Like how a union works when you're on a union job. We have a shop steward, but he's not the king of everything that we're saying, right? He's just representing what our word, and that was once the culture. Now it might be slightly different. We may have, a few in betweens where we have a Congress, we have a Senate, we have judges, and we have a spokesperson of the corporation. So it might be slightly different, but it's just interesting how we've taken bits and pieces of other cultures is to create, what we know to be this American dream. We don't always look at it as, that comes from this culture, this comes from that culture. But for the most part, that's what
the way that the government is set up, I think it comes from the Romans and the Greeks. Because if you look, they had a Senate, right? Just like we have a Senate. They kind of sit around. They had the one guy, and they like you see them doing Congress Hall. They sit around and they have back and forth.
And they get that. The Greeks get that from someone. The Romans get that from someone. It's like this. it's like a wheel that's spinning. It's someone's turn this time, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they're taking notes from someone else who's already done it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much been the case throughout history. We may think that this group was the first one to do it, but they really weren't. Like we're taught in school that the Renaissance was originated by these Europeans who, out of the blue, all of a sudden had skills to create masterpieces.
Mm-hmm.
When in all actuality, it was the Moors who had brought this culture into Europe in order for them to become more civilized and learn how to create works of art and masterpieces of music, and of course math and other types of theorems.
Yeah, my man algebra.
Yeah, algebra. So Geb was a name, right? Geb was
a deity.
That's correct.
Kemetic deity.
Correct. And the name Al-Geber comes from his name,
right?
Just like Al-Chem, chemistry,
right,
comes from Cam, right? So yes, you will find all of these different sciences come from groups of people that actually lived that were somehow or another given credit to another group of people who came after.
Yeah. Now, see, we were talking a little earlier about the education system here in America, and for us, it seems like it hasn't been really the best as far as what we've been learning or something that's put on the table. And I kindly told him, I says, every time I go to a PTA meeting, when I did with my children, and I sit down and I look around, there was very few people that look like me. So my thing was, well, you complain about it, but you don't want to be in a place or a position where you could actually have a voice to say something or actually do something. And I really find that to be a problem with us as a people. We sit around and complain to each other,
right?
But we don't go to, I don't know, the town hall meetings. We don't do things like I'm a part of the Black Caucus. It's in the Black Caucus. It's more like the, I don't know, White Caucus. I'm not saying it to say anything bad or anything like that, but I mean, it's
when it comes to the American education system, it was, I guess, created, or the concept by a man by the name of Hegel, a German. So our schooling is called the Hegelian dialectic, right? It was really a form of miseducation, because education has always been the purview of the wealthy.
Right.
They didn't want to keep. They didn't want you to be educated, because see, if they were educated, they wouldn't be supporting Trump.
That's right.
They would have enough common sense to go and do a little research and realize that, hey, listen, this man, every business he had, he ran in the ground.
That's right.
He raised the deficit $8 trillion, but he goes and tells everybody, well, I'm financially responsible. How?
I'm going to tell you something about that education thing, right? So it's been put out there that tell our young folks that college is not for everyone. Without them even trying. You're talking to someone the age between 1 and 18, and you're telling them that college is not for everyone. You don't give them another choice. So if you're in high school and you're busting your ass to get out, and you can't wait, you feel like you're in prison, and when you get out, you don't want to go back. So if someone tells you that kind of like it's okay not to go, you're going to opt out without even trying to go. I say that to say is that America is dumbing us down so that they can control you, so that they can tell you whatever they want, because you're not going to take the time to do research. See, when you go to college, even though you learn let's say if I was going to college and learn how to build these, I may learn that, but along with that, I'm going to learn something called critical thinking.
Of course.
You understand? So by me not going to these higher institutions, or at least being around educated people, I'm not going to have that in me to want to go out and do research, because my buddies don't do it.
Right. It's changing. The way in which students are being taught has changed. Back to your point, the original point. When the Civil War ended, right, the job or the task of educating the freed Negroes was given to the loser of the war, the Confederates. So there was a group called the Daughters of the Confederacy. And they were tasked with creating a curriculum. of which was the curriculum for the greater part of the early 20th century.
I'm going to ask you to hold that thought.
Okay.
It's not really a commercial break, but we have to announce who we are.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right.
Thank you again for tuning in. This is GenesisRadio.com. My name is Kendall, and this is the Empowerment Show. If you'd like to give us a call at 888-304-4401. That's 888-304-4401. Sorry to take you away from your
It's all
thought.
good.
Keep it rolling.
It's all good. So, just in summary, there was never a reason to truly empower a student. Okay. Now, if you put your student in a private school where you're paying for it, that would be different. But it was never, ever, ever the intent of the United States corporation, government, to actually empower a student with knowledge, especially the knowledge that had been passed on having to do with the sciences. Okay, that was reserved for those institutions where you spent large sums of money to attend. So everyone else, if you were lucky enough to learn how to cut angles on a board, you were doing well. But everyone else, no, that was not the case. And it's not the case now.
Well, they tried to come out back then at that time with some scientific proof about the black people having 3 holes in the back of their head or something like that, and that they had a scientist that wrote a whole big thing saying we were childlike and the whole nonsense.
Yeah, the name is on the top of my head. Euthanasia, or it was very foolish.
Yeah.
It had to do with comparing people of color to apes, and yeah, I mean that has been dispelled. Like,
yeah, I understand that, but I'm going to tell you
over.
something. I went to Germany in 1979, and they had the
Eugenics is what it's called. But go ahead.
They had the train cars. I was up in the country, in a rural area. So they used to have the train cars that went by. So we put the tanks that we had, the big guns, we put them on the train cars, right? And we would ride on the side of the train cars.
Right.
But the little kids would run behind us. And we had these, we called them John Wayne bars. They round like a chocolate candy, but they were hard as hell.
Right.
So, and we used to throw that to the kids, right? So the one kid asked me, he says, I didn't see your tail. So he was under the impression that this is 79, this is 80. This is 1980, 79.
Oh, yeah.
This kid was under the impression that black people had tails.
Yeah.
So I don't think a lot of that has changed about the way these people think about us.
Well, I pose the question to you: Are you to be responsible for somebody else's ignorance?
Of course not.
Can't.
Well, then again,
Can't.
Then again, I mean, ignorance is saying that you don't know. So you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
But if I can teach you, now you're no longer ignorant.
If you can teach you.
Well, I'm going under the impression that I can.
If I
already thought that I couldn't, it's no need to venture or even try.
It's all relative, and I won't even go back and forth with it. You know why?
Right.
Because just like we've had preachers and leaders in the past that have spoke in front of hordes and thousands of people, guess what? There was only a small percentage that was actually receiving that message.
Right.
And it's always the case.
Right.
Right. There could be a preacher in church on Sunday speaking the truth. I mean, and it's obvious what he's saying and what he's comparing makes the most sense. But there's only 5 people in that house of 50 that are really grasping what he's saying. And it's unfortunate, but that's the case.
Now, just to ask you a question. So, like I told you, you're the ears and the eyes of what's going on right now. You are present, and you happen to be that type of person that speaks truth to power. So, I'm going to ask you, where are we headed as a people?
For Black people in this country and around the globe. Well, let me start with this country. For Black people in this country, we have, Dr. King said, we got some difficult days ahead.
Mm-hmm.
We have some extremely difficult days ahead. And our problem is that we have failed to heed advice given to us by ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
See, we were enslaved, right, physically, but we allowed the psychological enslavement. And here we are, 400 years later, still psychologically enslaved. And it is difficult to break that cycle of ignorance because ignorance is bliss. We have become comfortable with our ignorance, right? So when you go and you try to talk to a young man or young woman, they don't want to hear it. So because of that, a lot of us are going to suffer greatly. Other parts of the world, in Africa, there are a number of countries like Nigeria, whose population is exploding, whose economy is on the rise. Ghana, the economy is on the rise. One of the focuses now for investors is Africa. Also, a place like Haiti. You know, Haiti is the world's, or in this country, or in this hemisphere, the poorest country in this hemisphere. Only because once the Haitians beat the French and ran them back to France, France forced them with America's help to pay reparations, bankrupting that country. Well, Haiti has a river of iridium. So remember a couple of years back when their president suddenly shot and killed in his house?
Right.
Because he didn't want to sign a contract. So for places around the world, they have woken up, right? They have broke the connection. And one of the big connections we have to break is Christianity. The way it's taught to us, the way we understand it, right? Once we break that, then we can move forward as a people.
I agree.
Absolutely. You said something key. Africa. There's some things happening in Africa right now that are world-changing events, not just for Africa. Bought a book today. I read this book years ago. It actually pertains to what's happening right now in Africa. The book is called The Wretched of the Earth. It's by the author France Fanon. And it was written in the early 1960s. And I'm not going to go too far in depth into the book, but there's a point in the book where they're discussing how these colonial societies in Africa have to rid themselves of their colonists in order for them to actually flourish. And the irony of that is it's happening now, like in real time. So you have Burkina Faso, Niger, and there's several others. It's not important for me to name them, but for you to understand that these transitions are taking place real time and live. And it was written about over 55 years ago. So I'm in agreement. I'm in agreement with what is being said. And I do think that on top of that, there needs to be an awakening that is not just for identity, but an awakening that has to do with all people, right? Like just recently, Russia openly discussed how they had a Black Jesus symbol in their rankings, right? The admittance to certain things like that, I think, would take us all as a race a lot further, right? Because believe it or not, bigotry, which is what I refer to what racism is a taught behavior. And this taught behavior is only based on how it was taught and when it was taught. And we've never chosen to question it.
And to whom it was taught.
Right. Because it's taught, it's not just taught to people of color, it's taught to everyone. Right. And I'm going to summarize and leave you with this. I played on a championship football team when I was a kid. Right. And one of the things that the coach did and said was, I need all of you to do your jobs. I don't care what happens outside. I don't care what color you think your teammate is outside. But in here, we're all the same color under the helmet. And it was pivotal as kids because, you know, we're thinking, wow, outside of this football environment, he's an N-word and he's a C-word, right? But here, that's my brother. And I'm going to make sure that we do our job because that's how we win. And if we took this same mentality with life, we wouldn't have these issues. You understand what I'm saying? Talking about winning,
Yeah, but you also know that color is a construct. It's something that is constructed. It's not real.
It's not real. It's pigment, right? And you can use this. The pigment that we're talking about has to do with your hue, hence human.
Mm-hmm.
Some hues are darker than others,
Mm-hmm.
but they're all hues. Catch my cue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Leave it there.
Hey, speaking of cute, when's the last time you seen the brother? You been down there?
Not in a. I saw him. Where did I see Q? I saw him at Union Community.
Oh, yeah.
I did see him there. I think that was the last time I saw him.
Just for those who don't know, IQ Cigar Lounge. Where are they located at, brother?
They are in the Price Chopper Plaza
I know about
in
that.
East Stroudsburg.
And I'm gonna tell you, I'm not a cigar smoker, but you go in there, it kind of has a nice aroma to it, But he also has a little spot where even if you don't smoke, he'll take care of you. I'm not trying to give him any free advertising, but the brother, he does his job in there, as we would say, doing his job.
That's
But I'm gonna tell you something. When I was in the military, just to talk about what you're saying,
right.
they used to tell us in the military, it doesn't matter what color you are, because we all green. Mm-hmm. But the funny thing is, when you got out there in the battlefield, wasn't always like that.
Wasn't
bro.
always like that.
No, man. You had brothers getting shot in the back of the head.
Yeah.
Yeah. Talk about friendly fire.
Yeah.
Yeah. All kind of nonsense. It wasn't like that, man. All that brotherly love.
I can only imagine, but think of the power. Think of how powerful it is if everyone was to buy into we're on the same team.
Mm-hmm. Right. But you're still going to have a power structure somewhere. And the
More
way
than likely.
you know how that would work out?
Mm.
I'm a Trekkie. So if you notice in Star Trek, what do they have? A federation.
Right.
Everybody comes in, right? And they have a big arena,
Right.
and everybody's got a voice.
Okay. So what are you saying?
I'm saying
that works, right?
That works in Star Trek.
It works for Congress too.
Ah,
Congress is the same concept.
but it's not
Think about what you're saying now.
Now hold on. How is Congress?
I will
mixed
explain
up?
it to you.
How is Congress mixed up as far as ethnicity is
I'm
concerned?
going to explain it to you.
Okay.
So Congress, just like the Galactic Federation, sends a representative from every part of the galaxy, as we send a representative from every state in the country.
All right.
Some of those states have people that aren't from this part of the country,
Right.
i.e. Minnesota. You may have a Somali community there. Right? You may have a Polish community, certain parts of Pennsylvania. You may have an Italian community over here, but that just happens to be the representative of that part of the galaxy that's coming to the Galactic Confederation, right?
You better be careful because you sound like you're talking about that DEI.
Uh-oh. Why? You know why people are afraid of these terms? You know why these terms are make people uncomfortable?
Why is that?
Because we're talking about terms that take away from me hating you. Okay.
Right.
If I'm not saying something that's going to create a hate environment, but I'm going to try to do away with that term. The term is diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like
something we should be
a
doing.
fun Saturday for a whole bunch of kids to me.
That's what it sounds like to me.
Okay,
too.
I just want to be certain because
Yeah. But if you remember when they talk about all inclusive, you got to remember integration and how that came about. Yes, they had integration, but did they integrate resources and finance?
Why would they? I mean,
So
look,
this is why they're really against all this inclusive because that
Look.
means everything's got to be all inclusive.
I don't think the inclusive is the problem. I think it's equity that's the problem.
equity is the problem.
See,
Okay.
because if you say we're equal, where's my money?
Right.
That's
Where's
right.
my land?
There you go.
That's where the problem comes in, equity.
Mm.
You want me to be equal to you, then you have to raise me up to your standard.
And that's always been the problem, right? So think of it like this from a business perspective, right? Let's talk business for a moment. If I came to your house and convinced you that house is my house, then convinced you to leave and never return to my house, then I convinced you that it was all right that I did that.
Mm-hmm.
It would not be in my interest to teach you
Mm-hmm.
that not only that what I did was wrong,
Mm.
but to teach you that it was illegal.
You're not talking about Thanksgiving, are you?
I'm talking about a portion of that.
Maybe
Right.
talking about Israel.
Could be talking
Awesome.
about that.
Yeah.
Which I could be talking about any deal and or treaty that was not being honored.
You mean like the tears of trail, the trail of tears?
That could be part of it too,
Mm-hmm.
right? But what I'm saying is, relatively speaking, if there was a deal and or treaty or an agreement made, I don't know, maybe it could have been in a place like Ecuador or a place like San Salvador. And it just so happens that now you're starting to see the remnants of said deal that did not help anyone,
Mm-hmm.
then you might see the repercussions of these things.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I
Well, the deal helped somebody. It may not have helped you, but it's somebody.
It's possible.
Somebody got in power. Somebody got some coins in their pocket,
Yeah.
and they didn't care like they do now about you. Just like I'm telling you about, these MAGA folks. They kill me with it's like they want to call themselves patriot, but they don't want to do anything patriotic,
Right.
except for violence. They constantly seem to. If I'm not with you, then apparently I'm against you, even though we're all Americans.
Right.
But I can't have a say. Only you can have a say.
Right.
If I don't agree with your say so, you're gonna pick up a baseball bat.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you have to understand something. So, Caucasian people, it is believed they come from Europe.
Mm.
Okay. What natural resource do Europe have?
Mm-hmm.
You go down to Africa, there's gold, there's diamond, there's strategic minerals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything concentrated for the most part in
Vibranium.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. So now for Europeans, what they had some forests, they had wood, they had a little bit of material wealth, but they had to fight each other for everything.
Yeah.
So they became violent people, right? Because they had to take from another person. So it's become like second nature to them.
Just as a point of reference, there was a young man, his name was Eric the Red. So if you want to know about the violence, the rape, the pillage, and going through Europe and what they did and how they did it and why they did it, you can check out my man Eric the Red. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Well, you see what the Vikings did, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was all throughout Europe. You know, I mean, when they talk about black on black crime, they never talk about the fact how many times did they go to war in Europe?
Mm.
England, France, Spain, Goths, Visigoths, Celts, Normans. They were always at war with one another until the Catholic Church said, hey, listen, you need to stop fighting amongst yourselves and you need to go down to Africa. And when you get down there, right, let's begin to divide up that continent.
Mm.
So I think it was about, I don't know, maybe the 3rd, 4th century when Constantine called the Council of Nicaea.
Mm.
And there were several councils of Nicaea where they said, okay, we're going to stop fighting each other. We're going to unite under the banner of Christianity.
Mm.
And we're going to go down to Africa and we're going to divide that up. So Germany, you take this, France, you take that, Spain, you take this, Portugal, that's yours, Italy, that's yours.
Mm. You know, you were speaking about Ghana. Do you know the official language in Ghana?
There's many.
Well, the official language in Ghana is English.
Mm-hmm.
I say that to say it's an African country, but the official language is of another country. Or some of the most beautiful places you want to see in Africa, like the Victoria Falls.
Mm-hmm.
Victoria Falls.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the Victoria Falls.
Absolutely.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. That doesn't sound like Swahili to me.
It's
Well,
not.
don't be shocked because the places where there are people of color, all right, hear me when I say, because what we know to be Africa is not the only place on the planet that has people of color traditionally living there for centuries. All right, it just so happens to be the largest place,
Mm-hmm.
right? But there are other places like
Brazil being the second largest.
that's one way of looking at it. But there are also islands,
Mm-hmm.
like you have Falkland Islands, you have Caribbean islands, you have islands in Japan that they have people of color, right? There's places in Turkey, Saudi Arabia, so on and so forth. I can go on and on. But the reason I bring this up is because we are taught that Africa is the place where all the people of color come from. But in all actuality, and don't believe what I'm about to tell you, you can research what I'm about to say.
Right? I know what you're gonna say.
Is that prior to what we know to be the flood, there were inhabitants in what was 3 continents, right? And before these continents drifted apart,
Pangea.
correct, right? And it was also referred to as the 3 Indias.
Oh, say that word again.
Pangea.
Which means
That is Earth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was also called Ki. It was called Pangea. It was also called T. There was several names.
don't mind me for asking you to elaborate.
Nah, it's all good. It's all good. But I only share that
because I'm going to tell you, you may know, I may know, he may know, but they may not know.
Right. Yeah, that's all right, and that's why I brought it back up. So
I know.
that was the only reason why I made mention is because we have a tendency to think that that's the only place, and it's not, because people of color were on the entire planet and still are to this day.
And you know, it's interesting, right? For when you say education, right? If Europeans were to begin to teach real history, they would be in real trouble. See, a lot of people we think were white, we're not. They have co-opted these people. So when the Moors came across, they didn't just stop at Spain. Some Moors went as far north as Ireland. So somebody like Beethoven was a black Moor, black like a Moor. So when you see Beethoven, what do you see?
A white guy.
Right. But that's not the case.
Just like Jesus.
You know, the most prolific writer in Europe,
Shakespeare.
Well, at that time, but before that,
Socrates.
no. So in Russia, you had Alexander Pushkin.
Yeah.
He was black. In France, you had Dumas, Alexander Dumas, the most prolific writer in Europe at that time. He was black. But you never see that when you go to history class. They don't show you those things.
That's why they call it his story.
Don't forget King James.
The monarch? You mean that monarch?
Say it again.
The monarch, the dictator King
I'm
James?
talking about the King James that we know of that wrote a book that might have been of color. That's what I'm talking about.
See, that's what I'm saying. The Moors went way further north than what they tell us. They tell us that the Moors stopped in Spain, but that's not true. So when we talk about the Crusades, right, to get the Moors out, there were 9 of them. They tell you, they make it seem like it was just one. There were 9 Crusades. It took years to get the Moors out, and the remnant stayed behind.
He knows why I'm looking at him.
Well,
because I discussed it already.
Yeah, we talked.
Yeah.
I know we started on over time, so I ain't gonna create nothing too big. But I'm gonna ask this question, right?
Hold on. See, Terry is in the car listening, so it's take time. Right on, brother. Love you.
Look, because this is something that I found instructors in schools hesitant to discuss, and that is, if we're going to talk about the Moors in Europe, then we have to talk about them having a connection with people that were already there, okay, before they took on the task of educating and cleaning and giving culture to another group of people.
Right.
Okay. The reason I bring this up is because I have done the research and found, and this book right here actually talks about the whole Europe, blacks in Europe, and
books again. You gotta.
It's okay. It's okay. One could, because Dr. Ivan Van Sertima talked about this many years ago.
Right.
But just to summarize, right? And getting back to what you said, if that story was to truly be told, right, it would erase a portion of history that they don't want to be erased.
Whitewash.
That's one way of looking at it. The other way is that it's almost like I'm now telling you that Jack Daniels was created by a black man.
That's right.
Yeah, I know that. I know that.
Oh,
I did know that.
I'm just saying.
Uncle Neary.
I'm telling you this in 1955. Like
Oh,
this is blowing your mind.
Right.
In 1955.
Right.
And now I'm telling you that he's gonna have his own brand in the 2000s, and it's gonna be called Uncle Nearest.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I share that like that because some of this information is gonna go right over many people's heads.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it is going to be unbelief, never to believe, while others are going to be like, okay, intrigued, but it may sound so far-fetched that it's like, I don't know. I don't know if I can ever accept that, what we knew to be the Nile might have been the Mississippi. I don't know if I can accept that. I don't know if I can accept that there was a war being fought here while simultaneously slavery was happening. These are difficult things to accept, especially after you've seen proof of them, been taught a certain way. So that's where I stand, because there's a lot of different ways you can go about unpacking these things.
all right. Like I told you guys, I was very fortunate because I got the opportunity to be schooled by two very well educated young men, somebody that could bring me into the future. Because in order to reach the future, I got to go through the past.
Right.
So he, I got the guy to talk to me about bringing me from the past into the future. So with that being said, again, this is the Gynesis Radio.com. This is the Empowerment Show. My name is Kendall Stevenson, and we're going to be out. Peace.
Peace. I gotta go over there.
I don't know where he went. Oh, and I hate that I don't got my glasses.
You good?
Yeah, hold on.
I got a pair of cheetahs.